So this is my Acura 2007 RDX, and one of the things that annoyed me about it was that the upholstery in the front had started to delaminate, particularly on the center console and on the armrest. What I should have done was made a video of how the center console and the armrest had delaminated, but I didn't have time. So here is the center console. It's now been reupholstered by my local upholstery guy, and you can see that he's done a pretty decent job in recreating the original look and stitching on the original center console and armrests. So whilst this video should have been a how to disassemble and pull everything apart, I missed the opportunity to do that. But there was so little information on YouTube. I did get some hints from other videos on the MDX having similar problems. So what I'm going to do now is just show you how to reassemble all of this part and put it back into the vehicle. And the assembly process or the disassembly process is basically the same steps in reverse. So sorry I didn't video the disassembly, but now I'll show you the assembly portion. So what I'm going to start off with is taking the center console, which has been stripped down to its bare minimum so it could be reupholstered, and reapply it to the backing case and the hinge and lock mechanism that I have here so that it can be refitted to the car. These armrests are fairly self-contained, and I have to say the Acura is fairly well constructed in that all of these things were screw fittings. They weren't welded plastic, which can be a pain in some vehicles to reattach, but this should go pretty smoothly, hopefully. So I can't hold the camera and do the work at the same time, but the first step will be to reapply the hinge and lock mechanism. Second step will be to apply the backing plate, and all of these tapes, that's where I've kept the screws so that the screws didn't all fall apart or get lost during this process of reupholstering the center console. Now, one thing you should note is that just the quote from Acura to replace the whole center console was upwards of $800 US. I did the reupholstering here, I just picked it up today, for about $200. So it's a lot better proposition to disassemble it yourself and get it reupholstered yourself. So stay tuned and I'll come back with the first process of mounting the lock and hinge mechanism. So here we are. I've now got the hinge and lock mechanism set back into the console casing itself. You'll see that I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Oh, I must have missed one. 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 screws to reattach, and with some luck I have 9 screws. So I'm not going to bore you with me screwing them in. I'll just see you back once I've screwed them in and show you the next step. And there we have it. Hinge and lock mechanism reassembled, 9 screws. They're all the same thread, so you can't really get it wrong. Just don't lose any screws. So the next part of the process is to reattach the backing plate. This tape here is containing all of the screws. So let me just detach the screws and I'll bring you back in a sec. So what I realized was, I actually got that a bit ass about face. You actually have to mount the console to the hinge mechanism before you mount the backing plate. That's because a couple of these screws can't be accessed once the cover plate is on. So don't put the cover plate onto the console until you've mounted the console to the hinge mechanism. So it turns out that there is 5 screws, 2 silver ones and 3 black ones. So the 2 silver ones go here and here, which screw onto here and here, and the other 3 screws, 1, 2, 3, go on once you've affixed the backing plate. Or yeah, that's what I call it anyway. There's the 3 screw holes here. So screw these 2 guys on first, get this on, get the backing plate on, and screw the other 3. So I'll get the first 2 on and then show you what I mean. So here's that first phase complete. Sorry, my camera holding is a bit shaky, but there's that first screw, and there's the second screw under here. And now that all works like a charm. Although I have noticed that the new upholstery is a little heavier than the original, so it's a little harder to open all the way. Oh, there we go. Oh, it's made a liar out of me. But there you go, it's looking pretty good. So now I just got to fix that plate to the bottom piece here, and we should be good as gold. So that was a little bit trickier than I thought. Well, firstly, because it's new upholstery, the seams aren't as tight as the production version. So I had to physically manhandle and squish this on in order for the screw holes to align. But once I did, I was able to screw back here, that one, and this one, and it's all good as gold. Now, also a little bit embarrassing. The screws, you can't get a clear shot at the screws, so you might have to reposition the seat. Sorry, the camera's a bit wobbly. This is looking at the center console now from the backside, from behind the driver's seat. As I said, I had to slip it forward a little bit so I can get a clear shot at that bottom screw. So here we are, back in the car. And as I said, it's all screwed together, closes nicely. And my upholsterer did a good job at maintaining the original stitching style, so it doesn't look cheap and nasty. What he did tell me though was that this original vinyl material supplied by Acura has a terrible habit of delaminating. It's a pretty common thing. So my upholsterer gave me something that matches pretty closely the original aesthetic of the car. The texture's just slightly different, but nothing that would leap out as anybody to say that this is non-original. But I'm pretty happy with that. Good as gold. So on to the next step, and that is replacing my armrests. You know, when I looked at this job, the center console had delaminated and the driver's side door had also delaminated, which was a bit of a nuisance, but the other guy didn't. But I figured, seeing I'm going to get them all reupholstered, that I wanted at least the armrest and the center console to all match on the front of the car, so it didn't look too oddball. No one's going to really compare and check the armrests at the back and notice that there's a big difference. But, you know, when I bought this car, I was told all leather upholstery, but clearly not. The armrest and the center console is some vinyl material. And my upholsterer, he's a pretty decent bloke, said that this stuff will never delaminate like the original material did. So the next stage of the game is to reattach these armrests on both sides. And as I mentioned, I didn't film the disassembly process, but it's a simple case of reversing the order. Undo these screws, get the cover off, undo those 2 screws, get that off, and then disassemble this puppy so that you can get the plastic cover reupholstered. So here we are with phase 2 of the project, is taking these side panels off. This is also not very self-evident, but one of the MDX videos gave me the clue. This is a panel, and underneath here are some screws. And then right under here, see if I can get under it, here, under the armrest, right about here, there, is a similar panel. So I'm going to whip those little panels off, and that'll expose the key screw-on points for that whole side panel. What you'll notice here too is that the armrest is held on by 6 screws, and I wasn't as diligent about putting them on a piece of tape. There's the 6 screws in there. Sorry, that's a bit grubby. I'll have to clean that later. So let's get started. So I'll just take those covers off and show you where the screws are, take the screws off, and then show you the technique for popping that panel off. So here's the side panel. You just need a little flathead screwdriver to jimmy that guy off. And once you get that off, you can see that there's 3 screws in there that you've got to get out. So here I am looking at the armrest, go down from the silver bit, and you can just see under there a little panel. See if I can do this. And that's where that screw is hiding. So 4 screws in all. So those are the 3 screws that just came out of here. What's interesting is if you look in there, you've got 2 screws and a silver screw and a pink piece of plastic and 2 yellow pieces of plastic, so that helps you keep you oriented to make sure that you put the right screws back. So I'm going to put those down there, and then I'm going to hit this guy down the bottom here, pull that out. So here's the 4th screw, and if you look in here, you see that that's also pink. So you've got 2 pinks and 2 yellows. That'll help keep the screw count straight. Now the next trick is to pop that panel off, and I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to do it and film it at the same time, but those 4 screws are the only 4 screws holding the side panel on. And the next operation is to get under here. There's a little slot under here, and that's where you put your screwdriver and you jimmy that puppy off to unclip all of the clips. So we'll see how that goes. So right here is that screwdriver slot I was telling you about. So it's a pretty crappy angle to video, but I've got to get my fat screwdriver in there, force it up and pop it out. So once it's popped out, it should get a bit loose. It's not all the way out, but it does require a bit of courage. Things aren't breaking, it's just being unclipped. So you want to be a little cautious and try and unclip it evenly from around the door so that you don't put any pressure points on it. The other point I forgot to mention is you should do it with the window down, because once you get this unclipped, the whole panel has to lift up out of the window slot. Here we go. I've got it all unclipped now. See, it's a bit loose. You can see here that it lifts out of the door slot. Now what's going to happen is this speaker's going to want to come out, and it just clips out like that. So one of the first things we do, you see it just slipped in like that. It was really being held in by the pressure of that panel being fixed, not screwed, so it just slips out the side. First thing we want to do is undo this little loom connection point so that the tweeter can be put to the side without damaging. So I've got the speaker off, but you'll notice here that there's this little tab on the inside. You've got to flex that back before it'll pull out. If you're pulling on it and it's not very free, then you haven't pushed that internal tab in far enough. So don't force it. It should come out easy, but you've just got to get to the inside of the speaker, or this internal side of the door, to flex that tab back. Now if I lift this off now and I look down here, I can see I've got my cables for the door opening, and then I've got another electrical loom connection there for the central locking and the window. So I've just got to unplug that electrical connection point there. Here I am looking behind the side panel, and in order to take the panel right off, you have to disconnect these 2 remote lock and door latch assemblies. Just unhook those and unhook this here. Now what I found compared to last time was I was just able to take this fitting off the mount here, but I'm going to reattach the screws without actually taking this panel completely off, only because I found last time readjusting these guys once you pull them off can be a bit tricky to make sure that the locking mechanism and everything is still in alignment and has the right travel. So I don't want to make more work for myself than I need to, and this is proving to be a little more stubborn. I can't quite remember how to get this guy off. I think it's push this in, and it should just pop out, but there was no popping, I'm afraid. I didn't do it right, so stay tuned. I'm going to start putting the side panel on and start putting some of those screws for the side panel for the armrest on. Okay, so here's a reupholstered armrest, and there's the screw anchor points, 6 of them. Yeah, 6 of them. Now this little locator here goes into this slot here, and you'll notice that there's a little slot here, that sort of this slot here, that sort of locates into this sort of sliding arrangement here. So in order to get this guy on, you have to locate that sliding arrangement and sort of bash it into shape a little bit. Now, because the upholstery is new, it's not all folded nicely, but it'll fit eventually. It just needs a little physical persuasion. So I'm just going to press that in there a little bit, and then I'll show you the end result once I've got all the screws back in. So I did have to disconnect that wiring connector, and it was as I suspected. It's just this little tab here. I hadn't been pressing it down far enough. But now that I've got the cover off, I'll let the cables hold it just loosely so I can show you the screw points now. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 6 screws. So I'm just going to attach those and I'll show you the end result. So here I am. I've got the new armrests reattached. Oops. And one thing I did notice is that as you're screwing it in, you do want to apply some manual force before screws and tighten, because there's quite a lot of forgiveness in these holes. So if you don't want cracks or gaps on the final appearance on the outside, you've got to apply some force to get that armrest really bedded in. And as I said with the other center console, the material is slightly thicker and it's not been folded in as tightly as the original, so it needs a little persuasion, but I got it in there. The other thing that happened, so I probably have to revise my thinking here, should really take these off because they popped out anyway, so now I've got to put these back in. So the reassembly process, get these back into their little place, reconnect the wiring loom, and then re-put this back on the door, and then put the speaker on before I start mounting any of the screws. Now another word of caution is that all of this here is now free and the speaker is exposed, so be careful not to damage your speakers. It's a great sound system in this car. And so here we go. I did check all of the little connectors here, and even though I had to apply some force for them to pop out, none of them broke. So there'll be no embarrassed trips to the Acura dealer to buy new ones of those. So we're looking in pretty good shape for the reassembly process. So this is the door cover here. So just before I reassemble it, this top guy here, that adjusts the door lock mechanism. So it has to be set up just right so that the switch for the door lock is lined up. So see if I can rest this up here. So when it's lined up properly, it should unlock and lock. And when it locks, you should hear all of the central locking occur because this is the driver's side door. But if you see a gap like that, or it's not activating properly, it's because that cable is poorly adjusted. I happen to have fluked it the first time, so I've now put the door back onto the cover, so it's now just a case of me put that speaker in and then put the screws back in and we should be good as gold. So I thought I'd show you this bit. So I got the connection back in, align that with this slot, and once it lines up, just pushes straight in there, and now I can and that's in for keeps now. So just got to Just got to reattach the screws and put the covers on. So here I've got these screws reattached. I was just going to give you a little word of warning. Be careful putting this little bugger in here, because if you drop him and he falls in there, you have to undo all of the panel to get it out again. Thankfully, that didn't occur to me. So it was all going pretty well in the end. Just pop that bugger in there. And there we go. Job complete. Just a little quick check. Sorry about the camera work, but just make sure everything works. So all the electrics are working. Central locking's working. So all good. That's that all done. Looks as good as new. I'll do the other side just quickly. So I won't show you the repeat process, but it's the opposite side door. Same screws, same routine. I might actually have a crack at doing it properly and taking the side cover off completely so it's not as awkward. An extra pair of hands would have been useful, but my girlfriend's not here, unfortunately. So yeah, it might be easier to take it off completely and do it on a nice, safe, flat surface so as not to scuff anything up. So just a little revision to the process on this other door. I decided to take the door cables off. To do that, you just unclip, lift this guy up a little bit, and then pull a little plastic cable end out of that, or the metal cable end out of the plastic, and then they just come out of the slots. So they end up looking like that. So in reality, taking the door panel off completely is going to make the job a lot easier. Now the other interesting thing here too is that the electrical fitting is slightly different, not as complex on this side of the door because not as many controls. But aside from that, yeah, I should have probably done that on the first side. Just took the whole side off, would have made it a lot easier. Especially seeing I didn't have my helping hands here today. So we'll continue on. So, oh man, I should have done this the first time. Taking it right off was much easier. But put the 6 screws in. 6 screws. Put those 6 screws in first. Don't do them up tight. And then as you tighten it, also press this guy in to locate that little clip there. But with it off the vehicle, you can now exert some downward pressure here and here as you nip up those screws. And the other thing you want to try and do is really squeeze this in tight as you do up these last screws in here so that there aren't any major gaps. But I'm pretty happy with that. It's all nicely lined up. So here I am again. I've put these back in. You see those little clips? They just clamp around that little arm on the cable ends. This fitting here has been pushed back down, and I've reattached my cable, and I've also adjusted the cable so that the lock lines up nicely. So I think I'm in good shape to put this back together now. So that's the side of the car all put back together. So again, if you look in, that's the center console, looks good as new, and the other car door. Now, I did just want to show you. So this is the original. If anything, it's just got a slightly different texture. A little grubby. It's a 10-year-old car. Still goes good. Slightly different texture, but the upholsterer's done a good job of matching the colour at least. You really couldn't tell that was non-standard. The other thing I wanted to point out, these are the only tools I needed. It's a sort of a Phillips head, medium-sized Phillips head, a large flat head for just prizing the door open and getting that under that slot to jimmy out the panel. And the other flat head was just used just to get inside these little bit nooks here to pop those covers. But aside from that, I think this job took me about an hour and a half for all 3. Same taking it off is the same process in reverse. And I'm sorry about the crappy camera work, but I thought I'd put the video up on YouTube because I couldn't find one, and I had to do it the hard way and sort of make it up as it go along, finding all these mystery screw holes. So if you have an Acura RDX 2007 like mine, you're probably in good shape. If you have a later model, I don't know, I presume that the designs are all the same, if not a very similar concept. When I saw the MDX video, he had sort of similar little hideaways which gave me the clues on where to find it for this car, so I'm pretty happy with that. Basically a new car from the upholstery point of view from the front, and it really did cosmetically upset me having just those rips and wears in the center console and the driver's side passenger door, or the driver's side door. $200 later, way better than $1,000 later if I'd bought the original parts. And I did have a good local upholsterer here in Connecticut. So good luck with your endeavors. I hope you found this video useful, and next time I might even invest in a tripod. Thank you. Bye.